I'd like to call this meeting of the Dalton Select Board to order, please. Please note this meeting is being recorded by Zoom for the purpose of taking minutes in Dalton Cable TV. All those able, please rise for the pledge. Mr. Boyle, will you lead?
Sure.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Brittany, will you do the roll call, please?
Here. 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 Here.
Here.
Here.
Okay, next on the agenda are the minutes of January 12th, 2026.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the minutes of January 12th, 2026 be approved as submitted.
Second.
Okay. A motion's been made and seconded. Is there any further corrections or comments?
I have one, Bob, please.
Sure.
Page 8 of 8, where the remarks of the select board.
Yeah.
And I may have not been clear, but if that sentence would read, the attorney said, we, that is the select board, instead of we, the select board, did have discretion, and it is a lawful binding, and it was lawful and binding to sell the North Mountain property to, and instead of who we chose, the bid that was awarded, to whom the bid was awarded.
Right.
That's the only thing.
Okay.
To the select board, to whom the bid was awarded.
Okay, you got those? Okay. All right. Any other corrections? All those in favor of the corrected minutes?
Aye.
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 Opposed? All right, all right. All right. Need a bigger table.
Yeah.
The public address to the board. This is a time when the public may address the board on any item listed on the meeting agenda or any issue or matter of the town. If you intend to comment on an item listed on the meeting agenda, please do so at this time. The public address to the board segment will last no longer than 30 minutes. Each individual will be given up to 3 minutes. If you intend on addressing the board, we ask you to do the following. Please raise your hand to be recognized by the board chair. Please step up to the podium and speak into the microphone. Please identify yourself by name, address, or the company/institution you represent. Please address your comments to the board. Please make your comments concise and try not to repeat statements made by others. Discussion or debate on any issue may not take place at this time. The chair or the designee may answer questions on procedural matters. Is there anyone that want to speak to any of the items on the agenda? Hearing none, we'll move forward. Number 6, FY27 Budget Workshop. Mr. Town Manager.
Okay, so we start this off. And for the record, this is my 7th year going through this process, although most of it was in a different town. And the first thing I want to say is the first cut of the budget always looks hopeless. I mean, you know, it always does. So this is in many ways what we should probably think of as a worst case scenario. And the goal here has got to be to make this budget better and more reasonable overall, because this one talks about doing some fairly drastic things. So the first thing I want to talk about is that when I think of town budgets, I'm responsible for a portion of the budget, but we also have to keep in mind that there are also water and sewer bills and the fire district levy. And in truth, we don't have that much control over the district school budget. So I want to talk about what the major cost drivers are in this budget. So first thing, and they're a little bit out of order in terms of total cost, but state aid to Dalton,
We're looking at this, Eric?
budget discussions
Okay,
document
all right,
first.
okay.
We'll get to that.
All right.
So my goal is to give you the big picture,
All right.
and then I'll answer questions about anything else you want.
Okay.
So overall, state aid has gone down by about half since 2007. There was a big state cut after the recession, and it's never really rebounded. So that's one underlying factor, is that Dalton's budget at one time was somewhere around 12% state aid, and now it's somewhere about 5% state aid. And that hurts. That's a big chunk. The second thing is healthcare costs, as we all know, have been skyrocketing. The initial budget estimate out of MIA was about 18% for a healthcare cost. They've dropped that down to somewhere between 18 and 14%, based on the town's actual claims history. But the reason they dropped it is because they made an executive decision to stop covering the GPL-1 drugs, so Ozempic and the other weight loss drugs, because that actually drove like more than half the cost increase this year. So by cutting that out, they dropped the budget down considerably. We still don't know final figures. We should have those within the next 2 weeks. The other thing is Dalton and the U.S. as a whole is coming off of a pretty long period of increased inflation. And our budget builds in cost of living allowance plus step increases for most employees that is approximately 3.75%. And we can talk a little bit about what that actually translates into for employees, because I think that's an important part. That's a little later. But that increase in cost of living then increases our cost that we pay into the retirement, because it's per our total salary, essentially. It also drives how much the town has to contribute to Medicare. So all those things then go up by that much, because they're both income-based. The biggest and probably most critical factor is that the regional school district right now is still projecting a 9.9% increase. Okay? They're more than half of our budget. So a 9.9% increase in half of our budget translates into at least a 4.5% increase in our budget, in our overall town budget, if we have the exact same spending next year as this year. And I think we probably know that that's not tenable. So the second thing is we do have a substantial bond payment for the Wacona Regional High School that we're going to be paying off for quite some time. And the sixth thing is that we don't have a lot of capital reserves considering the amount of deferred maintenance that we have for, water, sewer, road work, need for a new public safety facility, and handicapped accessibility for the town hall. And we also have to be aware that we are likely to get a larger sewer bill increase because of the Pittsfield sewer treatment plant upgrades. I am trying to set up a meeting later this week with Commissioner Morales. He said he would meet, but we're just working out times now, because I want to understand when that really is going to come in. And, we're going to have to try to negotiate the best deal we can for Dalton, but we also have to accept the fact that they just spent $77 million upgrading it, and then the EPA came back to them and said their testing facility wasn't sufficient, and there's going to be a pretty big capital project to build them a new testing facility.
Can I ask a question on that?
Shoot.
When the cities and towns are faced with these big capital improvements, the state mandates these. Why can't the state kick in and pay some of this?
I think they got some of it covered, but not a lot. It's a pretty valid,
I would like to ask Mr. Morales that question if possible, so.
Yeah, I'm sure, given the impact to Pittsfield residents, that he worked pretty hard to grant
I'm
fund
sure
as
he
much
does.
of that
He's-
as
I
he
like him a
can.
lot. He does his job well.
Yeah, that's my impression. So, and I don't know exactly, so I built that into this budget, but since we also bill residents for that, it's essentially cost neutral as far as the budget goes, because we take in revenues separately from the sewer, and then we, we in turn pay it to Pittsfield. So those are why we're seeing big increases. And to put it in perspective, the real driver is the Central Berkshire School District, and we'll see that on the graphs in a little bit. So the second thing I did was I looked at it and said, okay, historically, where do we fit relative to other Berkshire towns? And I looked at it historically. We went back to 2010, and the two metrics that I think are important are the percentage of per capita income that has to get paid in town taxes, and then the average single-family tax bill that gets paid, right? Because you can say, oh, we got a crazy high mill rate, their mill rate's much lower, but if their property values are 3 times what ours, they may effectively be paying the same amount of tax. So the first graph is basically the average tax bill, percentage of the tax bill per capita income. And what that says is that currently in Dalton, the last year I could get data on, which was 2025, about 14% of the median household's income in Dalton is going to pay town taxes. So that's a pretty significant number. And in Berkshire County a whole, it's about 12%. So we're about 17% higher than Berkshire County on average. We're certainly not the highest, not by far, but there's a lot more that are less than us overall. The next graph is what the average single-family tax bill going back to 2010. And I gave you comparisons between Dalton and Berkshire County. And then I also gave you the tax bill. So I gave you the average tax bill in Massachusetts, the average tax bill in Dalton, and then the average tax bill in Berkshire County. And if you looked at just the state, you'd think we were a screaming bargain. And if you looked at the Berkshires as a whole, you'd think we were fairly expensive. But the difference between Dalton and the rest of the Berkshires has actually come down over the last 15 years, not gone up. So relatively speaking, we're not as much higher as we used to be, but we're still higher than the Berkshire County as a whole. Okay, so we all know Prop 2.5 and what that means. So Prop 2.5 puts a hard upper limit on spending in Dalton unless a community does some sort of override. I think given the fact that we're already a fairly expensive town, and we know there are a lot of people that are hurting trying to pay their taxes now, my guess is we wouldn't get support for a Prop 2.5 override, but it's something to be aware of that's possible. So because voters can exclude certain things from the levy limit, similar to what they did for the debt for Wacona High. So as of this year, at the end of this budget year, we're under the levy limit by about $375,000. And that limit increases by 2.5% plus the amount plus 2.5% of your last budget, essentially. So that means year over year, we could have an increase of about $910,000 or $810,000 without busting the levy limit if we absolutely maxed it out this year. I think it's probably much smarter to try to stay at least $100,000 to $150,000 under the levy limit, so you have a little cushion if something goes better, in the next year. The problem with that is when you start looking at what we base our budget on. Right now, best guess is healthcare is going to be up somewhere around 11%. It may be as low as 8%. It may be as high as 14%. That's the range they gave individual towns, even though their average is more like 10%. And talking to Dawn, our claims history for medical is fairly high, so we may be at the higher end of the limit. Just don't know yet. So the union contracts, employment contracts, all end up with salary increases that are about 3.75%. Core inflation right now is running between 2.5% and 3%. So that's not great either. So the other thing that we have to face is that we do need to increase capital spending because we have a fair amount of deferred capital maintenance. And the other thing to keep in mind is town government's getting more complex and reporting requirements for the state government. There's more and more every year. And the other thing that really affects us is that the procurement process in Massachusetts and the requirement for prevailing wage for everything makes the state a really expensive state, to work in and to do capital projects. So down below on this sheet, I gave you a 3-year projection of the cost increases and then where that plays out with the levy limit. So these increases are estimates based on the trends we've seen so far, and they don't include all of the current budget cuts. There is a lot of variability in this, and I'm not omnipotent. When I try to figure out what healthcare is going to go up next year, the only thing I have to do is base it on what's happened in the past. So my estimates may be high and they may be low, but it's kind of the best I can do. And if you look at the very top 2 lines, healthcare and education, you can see there is roughly $130,000 year-over-year increase in our healthcare costs if we keep the current staffing level. And the second thing is if you look at what the education costs are projected to be, it is right at $1 million. And go back to that $810,000 number I said we could max out the levy limit from last year to this year. So this would say to keep under the levy limit, if the school budget remains as it is, the funding for the town has to decrease, by at least $200,000 to even make the levy limit. And that's going to be brutal. So the first thing I would say is we have got to address, the regional school district is going to have to address that number. If we got that number down to 4% increase, we could live with that at the town, and we could get through with no staff cuts and some trimming and a little bit of hardship, but nothing crazy. So the question is, can they really do that and what they're going to come in as a final number? I asked on Friday if they had any updates. What I got back from Greg was that the individual levies for the towns were looking at a range of somewhere between 8 and 14%. So they're not talking about it coming down very much right now. So if you go down one line and look at the police and dispatch budget, you'll see it's an incredibly modest. I mean, they both did a really good job of bringing in a responsible budget. And same thing with Public Works. That number is actually going to come down a little bit anyway based on some changes we discussed with Bud. I had Sandy give me, or not Sandy, Dawn, sorry, preliminary voc ed based on what they got from the school for the number of people graduating in 12 and what they thought were likely to come in at the other end at 9. And so that budget's projected to go back up $100,000, which leaves us a budget increase of about 1.3 million, just with those factors. That's not talking about, there's a bunch of other things that play into that, but these are kind of the most critical ones. You know, and of that 1.3 million, as you can see, somewhere like 1.1 million is the school. And that's what we're really faced for. Prop and a half allows us a allowed increase of probably around 440,000 when you add in a reasonable estimate of what new growth is likely to be. So, and that leaves you a really big spending deficit. And if you propagate that out through 28 and 29, you know, you see it gets quite a bit worse. So the first thing is, this is not, we can't be looking at a one-year fix. You know, we have to think about this systematically, you know, over a multi-year period. So, and these admittedly are really grim numbers. And I don't really like presenting them, but that's my job. So the next thing is, I just listed out what the current full-time employees are by the department. We currently have a total of 41 full-time employees, which is basically 18 in public safety, but that includes police, dispatch, and administration, 10 in the town hall, 8 in public works, 2 in the library, 2 in the senior center, 1 in building and grounds. And then I broke down what the town hall employees are. And yeah, so that's all I want to say about that. So what is the path forward? How do we get out of what is a very difficult situation? So the first thing is we budget a lot tighter in terms of revenue to get closer to what our true revenue number is. You know, in Massachusetts, the theme seems to be you always pad quite a bit so you can generate free cash and then use that free cash for capital projects, essentially. So the first thing I did is I started looking at it and saying, okay, I want to make our revenue actually match what we're actually likely to take in and get that as close as they can, which will, in turn, in the future, reduce free cash. So it's not a gimme, but it makes the budget more transparent, which I think is important. So I guess what I'm saying is that if the education budget stands, which we can't do a whole lot about it, we are going to have to figure out how to shrink the size and functionality of the town government to stay under the limit. And that's going to really have some major implications. It's going to have implications for public safety, communication and police department, public works. And then next year, it's going to have significant implications on the town hall, because that's going to have to come down also if this trend continues. So what I want you to do is consider the proposals here as the worst case scenario. And our goal here is to try to avoid that, frankly, because they're not fun cuts for anybody. So public works, the easiest thing we can do is not fill the existing vacancy. That will result in a savings, and we're also going to cut one of the summer help positions and their emergency help positions. And we're going to defer some expenses, not a lot, but the reason why we're talking about deferring tub grinding is that, in a sense, it's cheaper to tub grind once every other year than it is to tub grind both years. So you can achieve some savings by doing it every other year as opposed to every year. So even though we are just deferring an expense, overall it's less expensive for the town. So I think that's an agreeable one. Dispatch. We can't eliminate positions at dispatch right now because there's a requirement that somebody be there 24 hours a day, and there's only ever one person there. So you're not reducing that number of people. it just doesn't work. The only thing you could potentially do, and this is would be several years off, is that you could go to a regional dispatch center. And that would save us money, there's no doubt, but it has some significant downsides because, when there's somebody in dispatch and both officers that are on duty are out somewhere, if you don't have dispatch there, you basically have a dark office and nobody to come talk to if somebody knocks on the police department. So significant downsides with doing that, no doubt. But, if we're really desperate, that's something we have to consider. The other thing is the Dalton Police Department. So currently, we have a well-trained, well-equipped, well-led department with a wide array of capabilities, that does a very good job for us as a community. So they're worthwhile assets to the community, and it does come at a pretty significant cost. They're combined with dispatch. It's not quite half the total employees in the town. So it's a fairly big operation. And they're expensive, but they're not unreasonably expensive on a staffing level. So I started looking at other communities with full-time, fully staffed police departments. And what I concluded is that their salary schedule is not really unreasonable, nor are the benefits that they have. So if we have to make a big reduction, this is the one spot where we can do it, but it's gonna be really painful. I also looked at, and I left it a little bit farther down in the sheet, compared us to a bunch of other towns in Massachusetts and said, okay, what is the minimum staffing level that we have? And you can see that we're already currently, we only have one more officer than the lowest on that entire sheet of departments our size. So we're definitely not overstaffed. So this cut, if we do it, is gonna really hurt. And I don't necessarily understand the rules on who, has to get cut, who doesn't. Presumably it's the last in, first out kind of thing, which in some ways is unfortunate from a budgetary standpoint because you're cutting your least expensive person that we just put through training. So we're sending basically somebody that we just spent a bunch of money on to a different department. So it's not great. I'm not going to say that. So I gave you a couple scenarios that would do it, but are both options, are pretty drastic. And I'm not trying to sugarcoat that. So I also, on the next sheet, I gave you the normalized cost by department. Because I've heard a lot of people say, this department's really expensive, that department's really expensive. So I put together essentially 16 years of data for public works, police, dispatch, the rest of town hall. And when I say the rest of town hall, I lumped in town hall employees, council on aging, building maintenance, board of health, and land use all into one pool. So I didn't have 18 different columns. So, and then I also gave you it normalized versus inflation and normalized versus the average wage. And if you look at the last data that we have average wage there, what you'll see is the increase over that period is really well in line with most of the departments in the town hall. In fact, the only thing that's above the line of all the town departments is dispatch, and it's not a whole lot above the line. So, which is another way of saying that our salary growth as a municipality mirrors the national increase in salary over that period. It is higher than inflation, but it matches other salary growth. So that's what I would have to say about that. So I guess what I'm saying is there isn't any department here that's unreasonably, seen an unreasonable increase in salary over that period. Now, there's also a bunch of things I don't know. Like, I don't have access, and I can't tell you what our employee headcount was in 2010, so I can't give you an exact number that compares employees. So I'm just giving you department averages, if that makes sense. So, yeah, we talked about the police staffing, which you can already see Dalton's value, which has increased 1 since then. But this is also a 6-year-old, 7-year-old table. It just happens to be the most recent information I can find. But after the post-commission, I know overall staffing levels have come up across the board. So I guess what I'm saying is I don't see us as an unusually large, overstaffed department. Now, coming from where I came from, where we had essentially 0 law enforcement, it seems like a huge staff. But the realities are, when you look at it compared to all their peer groups, they're not a big department. So what other options can we consider as a town? So the first thing everybody goes to is, well, let's cut the salary increases to employees. So you have 2 sheets here. The first is what happens at our existing cost of living plus step allowance. And, and then the data, it shows the salary, pay increase, and pay increase effect adjusted for inflation, and then what happens when you factor in the employee's increase in healthcare costs. And what you realize pretty quickly is that you got to make somewhere around $100,000 before, if you have a family, before that increase in salary is completely negated by your additional healthcare cost. So let's say you take it back 1 and you say, okay, we're going to be more conservative and we only go for a COLA of 1. That means everybody who takes insurance sees an effective decrease in their salary next year. So my conclusion on that is we're certainly not being overly generous by giving 3.75% total increase between step and COLA. So, and then, one of the other things I really want to explore a little bit is healthcare. I have been talking to my peers about that. The only thing that really seems promising, I think we have to look at a number of things, and we're not going to be able to do it for this budget year, but I think we should take a hard look at it. And the first is that, do we consider switching providers or plans? I mean, we do have multiple options. So far, Maya does not seem to be more expensive than Berkshire Health Group, so I'm not sure that that's necessarily a viable option. I think we could consider switching to plans that include 3 categories, which are single, 1+1, and then a family plan, because those are, obviously, if you have a family of 4, that the real costs are higher than 1+1. So that might make it more fair to employees. We would have to look at that. And then the second thing I know some towns are considering is switching to a high deductible medical plan. And we might consider that with or without the town paying a portion of the deductible. In the last town I represented, that was the cheapest solution we had, was a high deductible medical plan, but the town at July 1 of every year put half the cost of the deductible into a health savings account for employees. You know, and it made it more reasonable. Not reasonable, but somewhat more reasonable. You know, the last thing I'm going to do is, now that we've got all the initial budgets in, is I need to go back to the department heads, and I'm gonna ask them all to give me a version of the budget which shows, you know, around a 5% decrease, and what that would look like, and more importantly, what effect would that have on each department? Because, I mean, sometimes you can make a cut and it's relatively painless, and sometimes you make a 5% cut and it's really drastic. So we're gonna have to review that, because I think that's important. And then the last thing is, once we have a budget that is under the cap, and ideally 150,000 or so under the cap, then the question becomes, do we continue with a single insurance rate, or do we make the decision to split the tax rate between business and residential? Currently, there's a little less than 15% commercial, between commercial and personal property, or commercial, industrial, and personal property. So a small decrease to the residential tax rate has a fairly large increase to the business tax rate. So if we're gonna do that, we would have to phase that in very gradually, because I think, you know, the businesses would need time to absorb that, but that would reduce the burden on individual homeowners, but at the expense of businesses. And, you know, I don't know how many of the small businesses in town that would, you know, would be a real negative effect on. I just don't know. But this chart shows you what would happen, you know, and I put a scenario together that says basically we go to half of what the state allows, which is we increase the commercial, industrial, and personal property taxes to 1.5 times the residential tax rate. And what does that look like? And the reality is, it's about an 8% decrease in the residential tax rate to give you a 50%, you know, with a 50% increase in there. So that's gonna be, that's in a sense outside the budget discussion. But given how many people that we have that are cost burdened in Dalton, it's something we have to consider, but weigh very carefully against the impact on a lot of the small businesses we have there. So that's what I have so far for the presentation. More than happy to answer any questions you have about that, and then talk about what, you know, where you all want me to go with this.
I'm going to start where you ended, Eric, in terms of the single and the split tax rate. I know that's something we was brought up last week. We've talked about this. There are 4 communities now that do that: Pittsfield, Adams, Lenox, and North Adams. And we have 2 sides to the budget: revenue and expenses. And we've been focused more on the expense side, but in terms of revenue side, the state really doesn't permit us, aside from the property tax levy and excise taxes on personal property, cars in particular, real means to raise taxes here. And that would be something that, if it was looked at, it would be gradual. I'd agree with that. And I'd like to see those dollars. The levy limit isn't going to go down. All we're doing is shifting money from the residential property tax to the business owner. And those business owners, you know, they've given a lot of time and money to our community. And I'm cognizant of that, and it's a sad state of affairs, where we've held out at this juncture, but I think it has to be looked at. I just want to say a few things. I've done some homework here. The Massachusetts Municipal Association represents the 351 communities in Massachusetts. And last fall, they came out with 2 documents, which was pretty much the basis of the meeting that was held just 2 weeks ago, which Eric and I attended. And basically, they titled the 2 papers, A Perfect Storm and A Perfect Storm and Navigating the Perfect Storm. So this is something all communities are facing to one extent or another. And Eric is spot on when he says that over the course of some 20 years, we've shifted 5 to 6% of our budget from taking revenues in from the state to putting them on the property owner. And if you do that over 25 years, we've arrived at this juncture. These last several years, in my mind, have been ameliorated because of ARPA monies. Dalton received some $2 million. Those were strictly for capital outlay, not for operating budgets, but it's relieved our community in terms of the property tax levy. Those are gone, as with all communities. I believe the local tax dollar is the best spent tax dollar. Always will believe that. You can open up that book and see just where our monies are going. And I'm grateful for Dalton and how we're spending our money. We don't have a lot of fat. We're going to affect core services if indeed these scenarios play out. And I'd really like to get us through this first year without layoff, if we could. And remember, if there's a layoff of any kind, basically we're still going to be paying for unemployment benefits and a loss of services. And our people are our most important asset in this community. This is why people come to Dalton, because of services, and no less education. The big driver with education, of course, is the new high school, the bond, and that's coming down. But nonetheless, it's there, it's a reality. I don't believe they're excessive in terms of their operating budget, although this year, what little I've taken in, and I wasn't at that last meeting, but there are some real drivers with special needs programs. 2.5, as I said last week, is really a very shaky proposition. We all know core inflation over these years have well been above 2.5%. So we have rising costs, we have a lean budget, and yet we're faced with a gap. And I just want to ask Eric, in terms of free cash, we still have that $2 million buffer of sorts.
I don't have the free cash, so I don't want to give you a
Okay.
hard number.
Okay.
But I know we have more than $1 million.
Okay.
Beyond that, I'm not willing to,
I don't think it's 2.
yeah, I don't think it's 2, because we spent a fair bit last year.
Okay, good deal.
You'd spend some of it, yeah.
I also want to get back to Eric's notion, and again, I'm going to tell people, these figures that Eric's used and I'm using also come from the Department of Revenue, Division of Local Services. And you can go on their website and you can see numbers. And I think what we've pointed out is the single-family tax bill. I know people are very concerned with their tax rate, and Dalton has had one of the higher tax rates, but that's only part of the picture. If you look at the total single-family tax bill, Dalton has pretty much been these last years in the upper quarter, the lower upper quarter, 8th or 9th, pretty much in terms of the 32 communities which make up Berkshire County. And it's Berkshire County, I think, that we should focus on. But what's disturbing when you look at the numbers here is per capita income. Dalton's per capita income is below the median of per capita incomes of all the communities in Berkshire County. So we really have a community which isn't earning, doesn't have significant income, and that impacts our ability to raise revenue. The state has one figure here, it's called equalized value, where they look at assessments and per capita. And Dalton's is not very good. Just some figures. Dalton's taxes are $55.60. The high in the county is Great Barrington with $8,300. The low is Hancock with just about $1,000. So we're in that mix, so to speak. Income per capita, the highest is Lenox, 70,000 plus. Hancock at about just under 20,000. Dalton, about 39,000. We're about the middle of the pack, just below the median, as I said. And as far as equalized value, the ability of our community to raise taxes, we are, again, in the lower end of that range. So we're facing significant issues. I understand that. I don't want to paint as gloomy a picture here, but I do want us to use every opportunity to trim this budget, to keep our people, and to look ahead to raise revenue. The timing of all this couldn't be worse with the state's loss of some $3 billion from the federal government, and they certainly are going to be generous to the local community. And of all the local communities, it's the rural and suburban ones, and Dalton is considered suburban, that have taken the greatest loss in state revenue. It's sore comfort to know that urban communities and gateway cities have fared somewhat better. So I just wanted to throw that out there for reference and for people to see that they can go online to DOR or to the Mass Municipal Association and actually see this research which has been developed and which is sort of a touchstone to move forward. That's it for my spiel. Thanks.
Thank you, Tony, well said. Anyone else?
A couple of questions. When do you anticipate the final health insurance costs being known? That's important.
Within
curious.
2 weeks.
Okay.
But that's as close as I can give you. That's as close as the rep would give me.
Okay. All right, very good. And then has Central Berkshire given any sense as to when they might have a final budget, when all the revenue is known?
No, they haven't. I checked with them on Friday and had a conversation with Greg, their financial manager. He wasn't sure. They've had a couple meetings. Their board is meeting again to discuss it. But he was indicating to me that they had some, basically they got, in the end, they were hoping to trim it a fair bit, but they got less state aid than they were originally anticipating, at least proposed. And they had some higher than average special ed costs that they were going to have to absorb, which was part of the reason why, if you looked in their budget, you saw they added a whole bunch of paras. And that's because they're, I forget what you call the plans for
IEPs,
IEPs.
individual educational plans.
Yeah, required considerably more staff
Yeah.
from paras. So the answer is, I don't know whether the school is actually going to be able to come down a little bit. I sure hope they do. But,
Well,
You know, they
people
have-
can vote on the budget at their town meetings.
they
in the
certainly
seven
can.
di- In the 7 towns of the district,
Yep.
and the people can have a say as to whether they want to fund this budget that's presented. Considering the strain that the town budget is under, I'm not so sure I'm inclined to, at first glance, support almost a 10% increase in the school budget. But, okay.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah, I'll let others talk. I just had those 2 questions for now, but I have some more comments. as
Are the
well.
numbers in what we call the cherry sheet? Remember when I was on finance umpteen years?
Yeah,
Are they
the
all-
very preliminary cherry sheets are in,
okay.
based on the governor's budget.
Okay, okay.
But remember, that hasn't gone through the legislature or anything like that, so they're just the estimates based on her budget.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I get it.
Go ahead, John.
Is there any new construction at all in Dalton that will add to the tax base?
So I think there are, looking at Zillow, I think there are 4, four units, which is 2 duplexes, that will be coming on the rolls. I don't see a lot else. I had that conversation with Brian Duval, and he basically said there's not really much of any new building going on right now. It's a little bit, but not.
Single-family houses, that's for sure.
Right. I mean, longer term, if the plastics manufacturing company builds you know, that would have, you know, say a $30,000 bump in the,
They appear to be committed.
yep,
Latest information on that situation, met with their bankers, they got their financing lined up, and of course, as they said last week when they were here, they look forward to getting a TIF incentive.
yep.
which We explained to them that's town meeting action, and, but the board did support that. Did we sign that thing when we were here last time? The thing for supporting the TIF for the,
Had to go to the lawyer.
Civic ad?
Had to go to the lawyer.
Good.
Yep.
I just have, oh, I'm sorry, John.
Oh, God, I just read a big
Right,
other
Tony.
point.
Go ahead, Tony.
Yep,
You know, we could talk about this split tax rate when it comes up for, approval, I think November, December, somewhere like that. But years ago, this was looked into. And because the town is 85% residential and 15% commercial industrial, it takes a hell of a big bump to be shifted from the proposed taxing revenue, to the business sector to affect the tax rate on a single-family house. Even to do one house, or one single house, and get $1 in tax relief on the tax rate, it takes, I forgot the figures, but it takes a real pile of money being shifted to the business sector. And I'm sure that ratio hasn't changed, because business was 15% back then, and the houses are 85%, residential are 85%. So, but we can, it's easy to prepare them figures. You figure out what $1 on the tax rate costs.
Yeah, so.
Right here.
I gave you this sheet that has it, given our current numbers, what that would look like at any rate you would consider.
It's in your folder there.
Oh, in the
So
folder.
what
Yeah.
it does, is it lays out the CIP shift starting at 1 baseline.
In here?
Yep, and it goes up in 5% increase, I believe, per,
Oh, this is good. I didn't know you did this, I heard. And Lori.
Well, I didn't do it. I plugged it into a DLS spreadsheet.
This one
and
right
it-
here?
And I
That's
made
it.
Lee put in all the numbers, so I don't
Okay.
take any credit for it.
So we can
by
all
the
take a
way.
look at that when we
Yeah.
have an opportunity.
Yep.
And envision the huge amount of revenue shifting it would take to have a minimal effect on the residential rate.
Yeah, and if you also
But it's worth
looked
looking
at the
into.
sheet on the back, I laid it out for a scenario, but you can look at any other one you want.
Just another thing, I know I've mentioned this, Eric, in the past, but basically, the community's first responsibility is to service its debt. And I understand Dalton has about $400,000 worth of debt. So this is capital that we've approved at town meetings. And I know this is gonna go to the finance committee, because this is their bailiwick in terms of putting a number together, although the select board will weigh in, but it's the finance committee. But I'd strongly suggest, and this isn't novel, it was proposed to me by a former town manager whom I know, that we take that $400,000 and really exclude it from the levy limit. No shenanigans here. What we're saying is that we've agreed to this capital, but we're removing it from the levy limit to give the finance board, hopefully, some maneuverability, and yourself some maneuverability in terms of a budget process. I don't think that's unfair. I think it's reasonable in light of everything we've said here this evening. I would hope the finance committee would find that amenable, if not the capital plan.
Tony, you said the town only is in debt for 400,000?
Not the school, John, not the school.
Oh, okay, that excludes the.
Yes, it excludes the school.
This is just borrowing that was done for equipment, et cetera.
That's correct, yeah,
But, okay.
yeah.
So I hope the school board gets the message that we're sending out tonight in the circumstances we're under.
Yes,
Yep.
I have to agree with Mark and Dan. I cannot support a 10% increase when we're facing layoffs for town employees.
When I came in this evening, I had a brief conversation with the town manager about this issue, and he just flipped it out there that perhaps the town manager of Dalton, of course, and there's a town manager at Hinsdale, and I think there's a couple other part-time town managers scattered throughout the district who are in the same boat as we are. And they all draft a letter and send it to the school committee, telling them, this is all we can afford, whether it be 2%, 3%, 4%, or whatever they think best. And I just want to say that I think it's a great idea, Eric. I think the board would support that.
I totally would support that.
So you have our, like I said, I'm sure, is there any other town managers between Hinsdale?
Yeah,
Becca have one?
They have a, they
That
have
has
one.
a.
Administrators?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
Even now, you can even send it, if they don't, send it to the chairman of the select board. The seven
School.
towns, yeah. And really emphasize, you guys come up with a figure, whether, sure it'll be 2 or 3%. That's usually the kind of level we were willing to accept. And shoot it off to them as soon as you can.
okay.
Well, kind of tying in with that, I mean, I would think if we're gonna hold that line, we'd likely want to walk our talk. And that kind of ties in with what you were saying earlier. You're gonna request department heads present a 5% cut scenario. That 5% cut scenario, I mean, would that conceivably half the town operating budget projected increase? Is that the idea? Can you speak to that?
Yeah, so
On
if,
page, the budget summary here, the very total town operating budget.
so the problem, of course, is that most departments, the majority of their expense is salary.
Yeah.
So not everybody is going to be able to even produce that, because the reality is, even if they cut their capital to zero, they're, unless you, again, eliminate staff, you're not getting around that. So I don't actually know how much of a reduction we can see, but I told all the department heads when we first started that I wanted to give me a reasonable budget, and then also give me a, not give it to me, but be prepared to give me what a budget looked like with a 5 to 10% decrease in it. So they all kind of know that I may ask for it at some point, and I think now's the time to ask for it.
I'd just like to say I really appreciate you looking forward and to the years ahead, not just this year. And we got to be aware of that, and we have not seen that in years past. So this is a big
The
step.
look ahead, yeah.
And
Yeah.
look at the detail in this, it's incredible, so I thank you.
Go ahead, Tony.
Okay, one last thing. I know the school obviously is under the same pressures we're under.
Yep.
Their budgets, and I can go back when the covenant was made with the 7 towns where they were to be reimbursed for school transportation. We have the largest transportation bus network in the state. We've never been funded at 100%. We've always asked to be funded. Rural aid, Student Opportunity Act, Special Needs Circuit Breaker. I think our schools, in some respects, are a victim of their own success. People come here for the schools. They want to come to schools in Dalton. And unfortunately, the time has come where those funds that the state provides are not adequate to support the school system we've come to expect and has delivered. So I agree, they're gonna have to tighten. I don't know if they have a magic wand, much like we have a magic wand either. So I just wanted to say that too.
I was just gonna say one final thing, Bob.
Okay?
What you're talking about, Eric, ask department heads and budgets, all submit a budget that reflects a 5% cut or a 10% cut. But as we all know, there are some budgets or departments or et cetera, no matter what you want to call them, you simply cannot cut. They're assessments, like liability insurance. You get the bill and you have to pay it.
Yeah.
Electric costs or utility costs. You get a bill, you have to pay it. So this 5 or 10% cut really would only affect the major departments, i.e. the highway department and the police department. So,
No, I think we can definitely do some significant tightening in the town hall too. But
Okay.
there are limits to that.
okay, great.
And I
Yeah,
think
it'd be great, but just,
going,
I mean, you're aware that we are, that some things can't be cut.
correct.
You just pay them, it's a bill.
For me personally, when we start talking about cutting highway and public safety, that to me means nothing's off the table. That includes the senior center, that includes the transfer station, the library, and town hall.
Is the transfer station break even, or are we, is our revenue,
No, we're definitely not break even.
okay?
But in my head, the problem with the transfer station, you know, and I've looked into this a little bit, is that because we have so few people that actually use the transfer station, and so many people use independent haulers, if we start increasing costs to people to use the transfer station, I bet all we're gonna do is push more into private haulers and make our costs at the transfer station higher. So I don't actually think we can squeeze more out of that. I wish we could.
You know, I understand that. My question is more pointed at the fact that the town took over the transfer station when prior the town did not fund the transfer station. And so it is an additional budget, and if we're not at least breaking even, then that's something we need to look at. Maybe the transfer station can go back to private oversight, private, you know, running. I mean, why did we do that? You know, what was the end goal?
Because
We did say we wanted.
chairman of the board at that point in time thought it was a real good idea.
Well, we support, maybe you
Yeah.
didn't, I think I supported it.
I didn't
I'm pretty sure I
support
did.
But-
I
Yes.
wanted to see how the town could manage this, and if we're not making enough money to cover our costs, and Casella apparently was able to, then why did we do it, you know? Maybe we need to go back and look at that.
I made that point to Mr. Hutchinson, the town manager, when he took it over. I says, what you're doing here is, you're not, the true cost of operating the transfer station is not reflected in the revenues that we receive. Well, they went ahead and did it. Here we are 5 years later. People are starting to realize that was a bad move because, one, you have to pay prevailing wages, union contract. There's all kinds of reasons why Casella can run it cheaper than the town can run it.
Economy of scale.
Yeah, but, oh,
We have to pay their rates for disposal.
Okay, well, we'll look
Yeah,
into
so
that.
that's one thing I would point out. The other would be, when you look at the total operating budget and you look at these categories, it's not, the page isn't numbered, but,
They are actually
Oh, they are.
on the top.
got it. Okay, got it. I see it now. They're,
Okay, again,
page 3. General government, 3% projected increase just based on this preliminary budget. That's $130,000. That's not a lot of money. Highway safety, only 0.8%, $25,000. That's nothing essentially. And when you're looking at a $24 million, $22 million, $25 million budget. Contract and planning, 29.7%, that's $965,452. So that's gonna be health insurance and sewer, user fees?
That's, yeah,
From Pittsfield?
the majority of that increase, that would not look out of place if we were continuing our same costs with Pittsfield. That is in anticipation of what they've told us.
Yeah.
Which is increasing that by 1.5 times. But we're turning around and passing that on in sewer fees, so we're not actually, that's not actually additional, well, it is taxation
I know
because
it-
we're charging people for it.
Yep.
But it doesn't fill in the final numbers.
That's right. Then you get to revenues, and then you really see the true impact,
Right.
which is about total budget funding, about 4.7% increase, right? But my point is that large increase, when you look at the town operating budget and you look at just the 10.3% increase, $1.1 million. Majority of that really is these two line items that we have very little control over, certainly on the sewer side. On the health insurance, we have control over on the number of employees enrolled and how many people we keep on payroll.
Right.
But at the end of the day, they're relatively somewhat uncontrollable costs. So I think a lot of education, we may need a budget session for the voters in advance of the town meeting. We've tried to do something along those lines the past couple of years, but I think we definitely need to do it again, because people need to understand where these numbers are coming from, and if at the end of the day, we still have to present a budget that is asking for significant increase, we just have to be able to explain what's going on, and people can vote on it. If they want to support and keep town services, at the level they're expecting or have received in the past, then we're going to have to see an increase. If they want to accept a decrease in services, then so be it. But I don't know. It seems, yes, it's going to be challenging. So,
Yeah, very challenging.
yeah.
Just want to make a point of reference. Dalton, just this year surpassed the $1 billion mark in terms of property values or assessed values. So just for a rule of thumb, with the rule of three, $1 billion encompasses the value of Dalton's property. For every $1 million that's spent, that's $1 on the tax bill. So a home value, average value of $338,000, you'd see a tax rate of $338 accordingly increase in your tax bill. I think that's pretty right, but it's fast math. I'll call it fast math. But the $1 million increase denotes $1 increase in the tax rate. And then base it on your property value, and you can determine just what your taxes would, how it would be affected.
Tony, can you clarify that? For every $1 million the town spends,
Yeah.
it equates out to $1 on your tax rate?
Yeah,
the tax
we have
rate
$1 billion
itself.
$1
Tax rate.
of property, so the
Well, then
rule,
slide that against the property, but
right, so $1 million, the mill rate, 1,000, $1 million of expense equates to $1 of increased property tax.
I didn't think it was that much.
Well,
But
with
then you have
values
to-
at $1 billion, it would be,
Yeah,
yeah.
then you have to, then you have to determine the value of your home, how it affects you personally.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you know the tax rate, sure. You figure it
That's
out.
fast math, I think
Yeah.
it's pretty good.
Okay. Anything else for Eric?
So what am I not thinking about that I should be thinking about related to the budget?
I think you're spot on.
Revenues, however you can raise revenues. I know. And MMA wants us to have more tools too. They have to press the legislature. But
Yeah.
we don't have a lot of tools.
Could be a raise in fees. I think that's been suggested by the building inspector.
So we've already,
already did
those fee increases are already incorporated in the budget,
Oh, there's
because you approved
licenses.
them a couple weeks,
Like,
couple meetings ago.
victualler licenses, gaming licenses, all the fees that are charged will need to be looked at
Yep,
as part of this. And
Correct.
we've already adjusted some, or we're in the process of adjusting with the building.
Yep.
That needs to definitely be on the table. That's just it should be understood. I know people don't want to see increases, but we haven't passed any costs on in that way to any of the businesses. We're not changing the tax rate. We voted to adopt a factor of 1. So,
well, we voted to adopt a factor 1 for 2026.
6, yeah.
Existing.
Yeah, but we don't do that until November for 2027. I don't know that we're going to be adopting a split tax rate necessarily this,
I'm not
for 27 either, unless it's part of a comprehensive strategic plan, similar to what you've laid out here. But I'm not so sure that the benefit would outweigh the cost, the impact to the businesses.
The only thing I think you could do would be to do it as part of a grand bargain with the taxpayers to say, okay, if Tony's idea is that you want to take all the borrowing, the pre-existing borrowing, and put that above the levy limit, to say to the public, okay, we're going to go pretty much right up to the levy limit. We're going to ask that you allow us to put the debt that we've incurred as a town above the levy limit and exclude that. And in exchange, we'll agree to a split tax rate, so that will have less impact on you as residents. So if you're giving them a 4.5%, total tax increase, but then you're dropping 2% of that, that might be more palatable. So that's something to consider. I struggle with whether we should be doing a split tax rate, but if that's what you have to do to get it across the line, then maybe we do consider that.
Well, I just want to make an example, again, the split tax rate thing. One of the reasons that Mr. Sinicon Plastics over there is moving 3 businesses from Pittsfield to Dalton is because Pittsfield has a split tax rate. They're close to $40 tax rate on businesses, industrial, and a $20, give or take a few cents, on houses. And that's a big factor to businesses in Pittsfield. And you're welcome an opportunity to move out here to Dalton. But again, there's other factors too. Is there a market for some businesses out here, retail businesses and such? Now, we'll definitely take a look at it, and there's a lot of things to consider. But, and the business community has made it very clear. I mean, the president of the Crane Company came here, it was several years back, made it real clear that Crane Company would not appreciate split tax rate in shifting the residential tax burden onto Crane Company.
And I do understand that, but at the same time, realize that their manufacturer, in the vast majority of their personal property, is untaxed. So, take Silicon, while we bill them essentially for the building, they've got millions and millions of dollars worth of manufacturing equipment in there that is forevermore untaxed. So, I mean...
But that tax burden is a burden from the state. And what they call the income, it's not actually an income tax, it's an excise tax on equipment. The state income tax for businesses.
This notion of revenue isn't unique. I think I read in the paper the other day, there's a consortium of sorts with Lennox and Williamstown looking at adjusting tax rate for seasonal properties. That is, if you're not a resident in the community, but you have property in the community, then they'll tax the non-resident at a higher rate, shifting the taxes from the residential property owner to the non-residential property owner. So we don't have that in Dalton per se. We don't have a seasonal community, but, we're just gonna be facing what all communities are really going to be facing to raise revenue. So I think we should consider all options, however unpalatable, and just be honest about it and open and have a listening session, a discussion with our taxpayers, including the business owners, no less, sure.
Okay, we good?
Great session.
What are the next steps? We're gonna meet again in a week?
Yep, you tell me what you want me to review with you, and I'll be prepared to do that.
Well,
Next week's a regular meeting.
it's the regular meeting, yeah.
But there will be certainly some budget discussion within it. So if there's specific things you want to focus on, I'm more than happy to accommodate you.
I would ask Eric, in terms of the school budget, it's 55 to 60% aside, that 60% would include our vocational. We have no control over vocational, we pay the education and the transportation. I'd like to know as much information that they have to share with us in terms of why they're at or where they're at in their numbers. And to present a rationale, you know.
On voc ed or on
No, no.
education?
Well, if they can give us a heads up for voc ed,
Should
but
we
just,
invite Greg to hear?
yeah, I think Greg would be a great and I think central staff would be more than willing to come and explain.
Let's
you know,
invite
their-
them.
their
We usually do,
status.
every
Yeah,
year they
yeah.
come
Maybe better sooner than later this year.
Absolutely.
and present their budget to the select board.
So they are presenting in, I think, around 3 weeks to the Board of Finance. It could certainly be a combined meeting of the Board of Selectmen and Board of Finance. I don't think, I mean, the Board of Finance has basically invited everybody to it and said they'd like you to be part of it, whether you want to keep it their meeting or you want to make it a joint meeting or however you want to do it. I think that would be reasonable because we all have a vested interest in it.
The thing about vocational ed applications, Tony, you know this better than I think a student has up until April 1st.
They do.
But perhaps asking the powers that be up to school if they have any handle or grip, prior knowledge that is gonna be a big increase in the,
Because they're prepping the students.
Right, so what's in the budget now is the school's numbers for who's in voc ed, broken down by school. And then what, you know, based on the number of 12th graders aging out and how many 9th graders they're projecting to go into it, what that effect will be. So that number's baked into the budget. And there's a budget worksheet for that. So, but, I mean, it's not April, so it's all kind of reading the tea
Yeah.
leaves at this point.
I think it's April 1st.
I'd want to see the school before if we could. The
Yeah.
sooner the better. I
Yeah.
don't think there's any,
I would like
Well,
to.
I think the first thing
Let's reach out to
is
Greg
what we
tomorrow.
agreed to. Eric Spearhead's writing with the various town managers a letter and arriving at a figure to the school committee.
Yeah, that'd be good.
They probably won't receive it till, next week, so we can't expect any, turnarounds by next week, but maybe in 2 weeks or 3 weeks.
well, when they're comfortable,
Yeah.
to provide whatever information, that'd be
Yeah.
very helpful. I'm
Sure.
certain the public would want to know too.
Okay. Okay, future agenda items, any?
Yeah, Bob, the Clean Air Committee, of course, and the notion of filling the remaining vacancy on the Police Safety Facility Committee.
Wait a minute, in there, and
Two.
police committee. Vacancy. Okay. I have an idea to run by you. There's a lot of times communications don't get out there, and I think if we were willing to take questions from the public, I'm sure we can get Dalton Cable to film a couple of us to answer some of these questions on TV, so they get the truth. I see a lot of these things on social media that are so twisted, by the time it gets through the little thing, it's crazy. So I don't know if you think that's a good idea to invite the public to send us questions, and we can do it. A couple of us can sit and answer questions, and we can take turns at who goes.
Not a bad idea.
So we'll put that on the agenda.
I like it.
I just want to, be open and see what's
Well,
going
we have that on our regular meeting, not the 9th, which would be our next regular meeting. So, 9th.
We'll talk about it in the next meeting.
Okay.
Yeah. And we'll see what we can make a plan.
Yeah.
Okay? We'll see how you want to do it. Think about how you want to, present it, or whatever.
Lori, have we advertised that we're seeking applicants for the vacant position on the police?
On the public safety?
Yeah.
No, I don't think we've made a decision on
No.
that. It's been tabled a couple times.
We want
No, we decided,
I thought we'd bring it to us to talk about.
Let's
letters
talk
of
about it
interest,
in the,
How we want to go about
yeah,
filling the
but
vacancy,
you
John.
can't ask for, that's what I'm asking her. If
We haven't
there's a
done-
notice anywhere that,
We haven't talked about it here in committee.
I thought we did.
To bring it up, to talk about it. That's all
Okay,
we've done.
we'll just bring it up next week and we'll make a plan.
To bring
Okay?
it up to talk.
Okay, I thought it was a plan already.
Okay,
Yeah.
let's just move on. Okay, anybody else? Future agenda items? Items not anticipated 48 hours before the meeting, any? Remarks of the Select Board.
I hope everybody had a great Groundhog's Day today.
John said he saw a shadow.
Out bright and early, sunshine on East Route Down Street.
Did you see your shadow?
Yes, big time.
Yeah,
Dennis, actually too much. I had to run back in the house, it got too big.
Just one thing, Dennis, I saw Dennis this morning, Hometown Heroes. Hometown Heroes will be flags that'll be on Main Street and Veterans of Dalton, and please contact the Historical Committee, Dennis, and submit your fee and have your loved one up there.
the Lions Club's gonna do one.
Great.
Now, under remarks, I'm just gonna come back to the budget. Sorry. For next week, will there be more? So the budget you presented in this binder here, and also emailed to us today, this is the working budget. At the end of the day, this is the budget that we'd need to fund town services the way that they have been running. Is that what we're talking about here? And any cuts to this, at this point, are theoretical until voted on by Finance Committee or?
So baked into that budget is cuts to Public Works,
Yes, I saw that.
but there's
Just
no
not filling that one
cuts.
position, yeah.
Right, there's no, well, it's not just that one position, it's one
Summer,
full-time position, one summer helper, and one emergency helper,
Yeah,
which is, I think, practically as far as you could potentially go.
yeah.
And even that's a bad idea, because frankly, Public Works is what we need to work off our infrastructure problem. So in some ways, we're biting off our nose but it does not bake in, that budget document does not bake in any cuts to the police department other than what Chief Strout has already given me, which was a budget they could hopefully live with.
It would be nice to see, I hate to add work, but maybe some simple graphs to show comparisons to last year in graph form. It would be helpful to get a visual and maybe something that could be presented on the screen for the benefit of the audience next. Maybe not next week, or could be the week after, 2 weeks. Would that be something that'd be helpful that we could do? Just so that the public can see what we're seeing here. I know this is the beginning of the process, so
Sure.
that would be nice.
Yeah, I think the revenue issue over the last 20 years, what with state loss of revenue and how we've had to pick that up, that would be helpful. Median income, we talked about, versus other communities, and the average family tax bill in terms of where we stand with the 32 communities in Berkshire County.
You want to see that in, you know, you want to see all 32 counties, or towns in the, or do you want to see us, because I'm not sure I could give you a graph which showed all 32 for all the years.
If it wasn't a graph, a table, Eric, you know, a table, I mean, that's
Yeah,
what I'm,
tables,
that's
the
what
tables
I'm
were
looking
great
at
as
here.
well in here. But it'd be nice to get something we could put up just for the benefit of the public in a couple of weeks, maybe.
So people can see where Dalton is relative to our neighbors.
Sure.
I mean, for instance, Hinsdale has a greater per capita income than Dalton. That's a surprising fact. That's what the state reports. That was news to me.
Okay. I got one question for Eric. When is your next meet and greet with the public?
I believe it's February 11th,
It is February 11th.
and it will be at the library.
Okay.
And I would anticipate, given the season, I will answer a number of budget-related questions
you
from
will.
the community.
Okay, anything else? Okay. The next meeting of the Select Board is scheduled for February 9th, 2026 at 7 PM at the Dalton Senior Center with an option for remote participation. With that, I'll motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, good night, Dalton.